You know, I was watching cable news yesterday because I like to go against doctors' orders. They told me not to. No, I'm just kidding. But I was watching cable news yesterday, and you got this guy Sam Nunberg. He worked for Trump from like 2011 to I think 2015. He got fired. I don't know if he was drunk on CNN and MS. He did this like tour de force of interviews, and did I don't know, probably incriminated himself. He seemed like he was either drunk or having a manic episode. Neither of those, I'm not joking about either of those things, but it seemed like something was off. And he basically was like, I'm not doing a damn thing. I'm not going to talk to a grand jury. Mueller can, arrest me. Whatever. So, like, the corporate media is eating this shit up. It's like, they really, in reality, the corporate media creates news and content not based on what's actually relevant, but based on what they're themselves interested in, what they themselves find, popcorn worthy. That's really what CNN, New York Times, it's a profit-making scheme. I mean, once in a blue moon, you'll get good journalism from them, but that's once in a blue moon. Meanwhile, this morning, I saw, and I might do a longer video on this, but this morning, Jordan on Jamal Thomas would be awesome. I do like Jamal Thomas. When I start doing interviews again, I'm going to go on Jamal's show. I like him. I saw Morning Joe because, again, I just want to continue to poison myself while I'm recovering from surgery. So they are like 24/7 on this Sam Nunberg and what he said and what does it mean and is it Watergate, or as Thomas Friedman has said, Pearl Harbor. He compares the Russian interference to Pearl Harbor, to 9/11. So then they had Congressman Jim Himes on. He represents Connecticut. And, they're asking him about Sam Nunberg and this interview and what does it mean and yada, yada, yada. And you could tell, like, Joe, his wife Mika, they are engaged. John Howman, all the usual establishment bots. This was the only thing that matters to them. So Robert Costa, who is a Washington Post columnist, I think he has a show on PBS. I traveled on the plane with him when I was covering Trump. Seems like a nice guy, like dean of the establishment, as establishment as you could get as a reporter. Pretty much breastfeeding, excuse my French, from operatives, basically. Just regurgitates whatever they tell them, whatever he gets from them, to just keep the hamster wheel of horse race bullshit going. Because that's really what most of these reporters do. They just keep regurgitating. They're like PR people. They just regurgitate what political operatives tell them and spin it as news until you get to the Viagra commercial, which pays the bills. Or the oil commercial, because CNN and MSNBC allow big oil to advertise. And if you want more insight on what the corporate media is really like that, patreon.com/jordanchariton. I digress. So, Costa, the Washington Post guy, Viagra oil, that would be really, really greasy. I don't know if I'd like that. I don't watch corporate news because it's just freaking yellow journalism. Couldn't agree. Breastfeeding is natural and should be a proud moment for mothers. I agree with that. So, Jim Himes, Robert Costa says, Jim Himes, why aren't more Democrats running on Russia? Why aren't more Democrats around the country running on the thing we here in New York and D.C., the thing we care about? Our democracy was under attack. Why aren't more people running on Russia? Oh, God. I don't question Jordan's integrity. A little too much ego is my only concern. You know what, Lori? I have heard this as a criticism, and honestly, I think you're right. I think I have had too much of an ego in the past, and I'm going to work on that. It's as humble as I can get. This isn't about me. I've refused certain jobs that I would have made a lot more money and frankly been known to a wider public because it wasn't in my heart and it's not what I want to do. But I am going to, I think sometimes I'm a little boisterous and that comes off as full of myself. So I'm going to try and get rid of that because I don't want people to think I'm an egomaniac. I really don't. And, you got to call a spade a spade. I've learned some things over the last few months, my strengths, my weaknesses, and I'm going to work on that. So thank you. I think it was Lori. So what's his face? Costa says asks this to the congressman. The congressman says, well, Robert, the people in my district of, I think, Fairfield County, Connecticut, one of the richest districts in America, they care a little bit more than, say, the people he named a congresswoman from Ohio, in the Rust Belt, which we lost to Trump. When you ask the people in the Rust Belt about Russia, they don't really care. And it was almost like telling Robert Costa and the people on the set of Morning Joe that your cat is missing. You should have seen their face. What do you mean they don't care? They don't care in, like, Gary, Indiana about Russia? They don't care in, like, Dayton, Ohio about Russia? Like, the cognitive dissonance on why this con man, orangutan, who is a con man, misled these people in the Rust Belt, was able to win those regions, is still so vigilant. They don't understand. These corporate outlets, and certain independent outlets, to be honest with you, don't understand why huge swaths of America, it's not just the Rust Belt, there's a lot of other regions, don't care about Russia. When you ask them what's on their mind or what's their top issues, it's healthcare, the economy, violence, for some regions, immigration. They don't care about Russia. But when you watch Morning Joe or CNN or read the New York Times or even, frankly, like Fox.com, BuzzFeed, all these places, it's an alternative reality. They don't get it because they're not out there with those people, which is why I'm launching this company, because you got to be out there with the people. Let me tell you something. If I'm admitting it, before I was at TYT, before I was out in the country, I was a lot more of a capital D Democrat than I was like an independent progressive. Because I didn't know as much as I do now. I didn't see as much as I do. A lot of the places that I went to cover had Democratic mayors, Democratic governors, Democratic state legislatures where people are getting poisoned or black people are getting massacred at unprecedented levels, or Democrats are corrupt. So it's not to say, oh, Republicans are like good. No. But like, if I spend all my time, if Jimmy spent all his time, like everybody else, focusing on Republicans and just letting the Democrats be slightly less bad, but still corrupt, nothing's going to change in this country. And frankly, Republicans aren't the one pretending to be work for the working man. That's the Democrats. Republicans are pretty open and transparent about their corruption and who they're for. See no further than Marco Rubio on stage at that recent town hall over the Parkland school shooting. So maybe I'll do a video where I could show you that clip, but it was so telling to me because this is the type of journalism that the majority are being exposed to still. Morning Joe, a set of cosmopolitan, cocktail crowd, elites that think some guy who might have been drunk or off his meds or whatever, having a spectacle across 2 channels, I think he did 5 interviews, and, Russians trolling and penetrating the election system through troll farms or whatever is the most fucking important thing. So the journalist asked, well, why aren't more Democrats around the country running on Russia? Well, if you want to keep Trump in office, if you want to keep more Republicans in office, you should run on Russia because that's what's going to happen. Go tell the people in Michigan working 2 to 3 jobs because you sold their jobs to China that Russian trolls are their problem and caused it. Or the people in Flint, East Chicago, Wilmington, North Carolina. I just posted about something in Colorado this morning, Arizona, all the places that have water contamination and they're scared for their kids about Russia. I remember when I interviewed someone in Wilmington, North Carolina, I asked her, do you care about Russia? And she looked into the camera dead straight and said, I do not care about Russia. I want to know that my kids' water is safe. And I've said this to people online and on social because I'm called a Kremlin puppet because I won't join this hysteria. 2 things could be true. I have no problem with there being an investigation into Trump's campaign because you want to know something? If they actually proved, keyword proved, that Trump's campaign collaborated, coordinated, colluded, whatever you want to say, with a foreign government, Russia, Saudi Arabia, I don't care, to hack his opponent's emails and distribute them, that would be a major fucking scandal. I'm just keeping it real. That would be scandalous. Do I think it's akin to Pearl Harbor or 9/11, which I've heard in the comparisons? No, I do not. No. Thousands of people died at those places. But I think cyber warfare is a real thing, and it should be investigated. What I have said is, as journalists, the fact that we have spent 2 years basically in a giant, it's like one giant game of hide and seek on CNN, in the New York Times, like little crumbs, and speculating about those crumbs, what it means, and the downfall of Trump. And I would say this honestly, if it was about Hillary Clinton or any other president. It's not because I like Trump, but all of this speculation, all of this hysteria, when there's no facts or proof to show that the original charge, because I was on the campaign trail, the original thing that the Clinton campaign and their cohorts in the media were saying is Trump's campaign worked with Russia to hack her emails and distribute them through WikiLeaks. That's what the original claim was. But the bar has moved so far to now, like, collusion means, I don't know, Trump's son met with the Russian lawyer, and did Trump know about it? I don't think that's illegal. That's not something, as far as I know, that's not illegal. If there's something wider than that, sure. But let's wait for the investigation. Of course, reporters, they could seek out and try to find out what Mueller is working on or what Mueller has found out. No problem with that. That's called journalism. But endless segments and whatever. And, in economics, which I dropped after 2 days, there's something called the opportunity cost. Well, what's the opportunity cost of covering this 24/7? Half the people don't know if their wells in their community have water contamination. Most of you probably don't know, but St. Louis is murdering more black people than some countries murder, period. Most of you don't know if you've had ballot measures in your state that the people voted on that your legislature overturned. It's happened in South Dakota. It happened in Maine recently over ranked choice voting. Most of you probably don't know if, there's a epidemic of bullying and transphobia going on. Thank you, Kristen Saunders, for becoming a patron just now. Just saw that. Thank you. Most of you don't know that there is, it's not just big oil. Do you know how bad big agro is getting away with murder in your food? That's something I haven't covered much. I mean, there's so many different things to cover, and it's going to take an army, and it's going to take a media revolution. I'm not knocking commentators, because I think there's people like Jimmy and Kyle and Lee Camp and so many, Jamal Thomas and so many others, crucial that we have their voices. And they present a lot of things that I might not cover. Like Kyle, for example, I think is one of the best on foreign policy. I haven't covered foreign policy much because I think America's so fucked up at what's going on here. I focus on that. But I have learned a lot just watching him when I can. So you don't need to be in the field to do a good job and to have something to offer. I feel, based on my experience, it's just another layer that's needed. A further layer. Because you know what? There might be things that Jimmy, because he's not out there, doesn't even know about. So how's Jimmy going to go crazy over something if he don't know about it? CNN's certainly not informing him about anything. So that's where I'm hoping I come in. I do have some people in mind to join me that I think are dynamic, I think are really aggressive, I think are really think differently. Because it's not just people that are willing to sacrifice in their life in terms of traveling. And, it takes a toll on your body. As I've just shown you, I just had surgery. It takes a toll on relationships. You sacrifice. I'm not going off to war, but it's a sacrifice to do in the field of journalism. But you also need people willing to think differently. Because let me tell you something. If I and I give TYT credit, I did in a separate video. If I went to most outlets, it would have said, 3 weeks before the election, I want to go to North Dakota because they're really trampling on native rights and putting a pipeline through the longest river in America. Most news execs would have told me to go back to my desk. If I would have told my bosses at MSNBC, CNN, or a lot of places that I wanted to go do a disappearing middle class tour through Pennsylvania, Michigan, Illinois, Wisconsin, Ohio, just to interview random Americans who are struggling, they would have not only told me go back to my desk, but maybe go to the nurse on the 11th floor. So, I give TYT credit for that. They definitely were for me doing those things. Since then, who knows?